Hello everyone, welcome. Today is the 11th of July 2023 and we're going to talk about Erdogan. I was going to talk about him yesterday because about 2 or 3 days ago we learned that the three Ukrainian leaders, Putin and Erdogan, had agreed that they would stay there in Turkey until the end of the conflict, and then for some reason, we don't know what the reason is, Erdogan decided to release them. And we were all asking why, different reasons, speculations and so on. And I was going to talk about it, and then I thought, well, perhaps not, because we're not sure of the reasons. I said I'm going to see what is going to happen from now on. A clear sign of where Erdogan is going to be. We know that he is a little bit all over the place. I don't say that in any pejorative way. I mean, a leader of a country sometimes has to, in geopolitics, if you have the interest of your nation, let's be charitable and let's say that it's not just his own political self-interest, but if you are the leader of a nation and you're responsible, your main thing is the interest of your nation. It could be that sometimes, you have to move about a little bit. Okay, so, more to this side or the other side. And he seems to do that. But I thought, since we don't know the reasons for it, there have to be some reasons, obviously. Let me wait. One thing that will tell me whether he has decided to be on this side rather than the other side is whether or not, now that the NATO meeting is taking place, what he's going to do about Sweden, whether he will eventually say yes, they can come in and not veto it, or whether he will continue with his veto. That is going, to my mind, yesterday, that was going to be essential as to where he stood, if indeed still in one place. And lo and behold, today we hear that, yes, he finally, apparently, we have to say this because things could change again, but apparently today, the 11th, he's willing to not veto, to accept Sweden into NATO. All right, so that seems to place him clearly, for the time being at least, on the one side of the argument and not on the other. So, although not necessarily so, who knows? But in any case, I started thinking about pacts and agreement and honor and betrayal and all these kinds of things. Because what I had a little bit of a problem with was, as I said, I can understand a leader sometimes having to break pacts or agreements or allegiances according to many factors. Sometimes we don't even know. But it seems that he didn't tell the Russian president that he was going to do so. Apparently, again, the Russians were a little bit angered by this move, which they hadn't expected, or something like that. And to me, if this is so, if this is true, that makes a lot of difference as to the meaning of the breaking of a pact. Because he could have told them in advance. He could have called Putin and say, look, I know we have this agreement, but let me tell you, the situation has changed. You look after the interests of your country. I'm looking after the interest of my country, and at the moment the puzzle is that I have to move in this direction. He didn't need to give a great explanation, but just to let him know that he was going to do this, and perhaps give them a chance to think about it, reply, whatever it was. But apparently he didn't do so, and that to me is crucial. So I thought, okay, so all this intrigues and things, I have to go, before I do my little video here, I have to go and read something about all these things, intrigues and moral arguments, and of course you have to go to the classics. Now, I'm not well read. I'm trying to catch up in my retirement, but well read enough a little bit as to know where to go, to read. So there are so many writers. Practically every philosopher has dealt with this tension between the honorable and the useful, the right thing to do and my own self-interest. And it's not as clear-cut as we may think at the very beginning. Because there is always something, for example, okay, this is the question: does the useful always outweigh the honorable, or can it be so and still be honorable? For example, killing is wrong, okay. But if there is a terrible person, serial killer, a horrible dictator who's going around killing widows and orphans and so on, would it be justified to kill him? Well, then we enter into this, it depends in some circumstances, perhaps not in others. In other words, that is what I meant. Sometimes it's not very clear cut. And so I went to, of all the ones, the writers, philosophers I could have chosen, I decided to go back to old Cicero here, because I thought he was a senator, he was a politician in the 1st century before Christ. Christianity is not at all there, okay, when he is writing. And he was a great orator, known for his now writings, but then for his oratory. Okay, so old Cicero would stand up in the Senate and start, and everyone would go, ooh, ah. Great. Okay, so I thought he must have something to say about this, and indeed he does. So this is the book that on obligations, Cicero. The word obligation is a good translation because it's different from duty. Obligation carries with it a certain moral connotation. Duty may or may not in all cases. For example, if you employ me to go and clean your house, my duty on Monday is to clean the toilets, and on Tuesday is to clean the kitchen. That's my duties. Yeah, it carries no moral obligation, no moral ethical nuance there. An obligation does. And so he's going to talk about, because all this is pre-Christian, okay, he's going to talk about the following on Plato. He's going to talk about the natural qualities, the natural virtues of the past, of the natural law, wisdom, justice, prudence, courage, temperance, and so on. The classics, you have to sit down and take your time because they take forever. They're not in a hurry and they take forever to explain every little detail. And you're reading, for example, Cicero, and you say, come on, Cicero, just get to the point, okay? Because he's taking us through all these different connotations, nuances, interpretations, and so on. But anyway, he makes a point. He brings in the word, the concept of shameful. Sometimes we have to do the useful things. Sometimes it is the right thing to do, especially if you're a leader who has to take into account the well-being of your nation, and so that is your first priority. So the honorable and the useful can sometimes coexist, yes, but then he asks this question: if it is the useful that you opt for in this particular case, in order to avoid being shameful, he asks the questions: would you do it even if no one saw you do this act? For example, I hate this person, I'm going to kill him. If there was no possible way at all that anyone ever could find out, would I do it? Would I kill my grandmother for her wealth or something? If there was no possible way. Okay, we enter into, modulations here of ethics and morals and so on. He says, let me read you this little bit. Such men with erroneous judgment have their eyes fixed on rewards, but not on the penalty which they pay afterwards. Sometimes hesitation, dancing around, has an element of wickedness when it's done to deceive. Can the useful be embraced without incurring dishonor? He gives an example, interesting. In a race, a runner on the racetrack must strain and compete with all his might to come first, but on no account must he trip or hand off a fellow competitor. Likewise, in other words, cheating, yeah? Likewise in life, there is nothing wrong in an individual seeking his or her own self-interest, but it would be dishonorable and unjust to deprive the other, to do it at the expense of the other, to take advantage of the other. Yeah, you're with me. Things which can be useful, he adds, public offices, riches, sensual pleasures of any kind and the like, must never take precedence over friendship or pacts or agreements. Pacts. Let me tell you, before we move on with Cicero, about pacts and agreements and alliances in the old world. If two leaders came together to make an alliance or to an agreement of some kind, the ritual was that you would split an animal in half, a cow, for example, or a pig. In Rome, it was a pig, and you see it. You see this in Virgil and Ovid and many others. That then the split animal would be offered to Jupiter and so on. In the Old Testament, it is different animals, but in any case, the idea was that you split the cow in half, and then the two leaders would walk in the middle of this split animal, blood all over the place. That was the point, blood, okay? Swearing to the oath that they had given each other. And that oath was made in blood. That was the point of it, the blood. And so if one of them broke the pact, he would have to incur death. I don't know whether it would be to cut him in half, but anyway, that was extremely important, not to break your pact with the person that you agreed something on. In other traditions, for example, the two leaders would slit a finger open, and they would mix the blood from each other's fingers, meaning again in blood that you couldn't break that promise. Your blood was now mixed with my blood and mine with yours, and so on. In other cultures, it would be you would put blood, your own blood, and wine and drink it. Yes, so this blood thing seemed to be extremely important for these pacts and agreements. Cicero then continues, but situations arise when the useful seems to conflict with the honorable, so that we must then investigate whether indeed it is in conflict or whether the two can be reconciled. As an example, he says, this is interesting, an interesting example. Listen to this. Don't go away. Listen to this. Let us assume that a good man has shipped a large cargo of corn from Alexandria to Rhodes. At a time when the people of Rhodes, for example, were suffering shortages and hunger, and grain was extremely expensive. There would be nowhere to find it. So now this good man has a cargo going to Rhodes with lots of corn. But he also knows, and he's not going to disclose this, he also knows that there are other merchants preparing to ship cargoes. They will be coming in the next few days. And so they're shipping corn, and so because of competition, the competition that he is going to have in a few days' time, the price of corn obviously will come down in just a few days. But he gets to Rhodes first. Should he charge the highest price, allowing the people to believe that there was no more corn available now or ever? He decides not to let them know. Though he says to himself, I kind of know that this is dishonorable, but I will do it because it is in my own self-interest. I have to take advantage of this. And Cicero says, one person will say that the action is advantageous to him, so he should do it. And it's not really dishonorable because it is in his own interest. And other people will say that it should not be performed because it is dishonorable. In other words, when you're thinking about your own self-interest, it's not just your self-interest. Good that it may be for you to follow in many instances. But there is an additional factor here, and that is whether or not you are actually fraudulent. In other words, you are taking advantage of others for your own self-interest. So this becomes a moral question. He talks about good faith agreements, both parties agreeing on something, and both, in other words, honest negotiations between honest parties. And when there is an element of fraud, of deceit, that is malicious fraud, and whether the agreement should be kept, and so on. But he gives us a terrific example here of There are two guys. I'm going to put it in my own words, okay? Two guys. Canius, that's his name, who is a Roman knight, very wealthy. And Pythius, who is a Syracuse banker. So you have Canius, a Roman knight, wealthy, and Pythius, a banker. Now Canius, the knight, very busy, very wealthy, wants to buy a estate in the country. Not to do business, but to actually go there and relax. He says not to do business, but to be free of business, far from the madding crowds. That is where he just wants to go and forget everything. Okay? He has the money to buy whatever he wants. And he's letting his friends know, I'm looking for a place where I can just go and relax and so on. And there's this Pythius, the banker, who has a estate. And so instead of saying, hey, Canius, I hear that you want to buy a house. Yes, well, I have one to sell. He says to him, look, my good friend, Canius, I do have a estate, but, I don't want to sell it. It's not for sale or anything, but since you are looking for a place to relax, you can make use of it. I don't mind because I hardly use it. I'm only there twice a year, whatever. Okay, so you're my friend. You can use it. I don't mind. And as a matter of fact, you can come. I'll invite you to dinner there. We can both go there, and I'll show you the estate and the mansion and everything else. And if you like it, you're welcome to stay whenever you want. Oh, thank you very much. So they both go. Beforehand, Pythius, the banker, has called the fishermen of faraway villages, bribe them, pay them money, and say, I want you to come tomorrow to the lake where we are, in my mansion, and bring lots of fish that you have caught wherever. And just bear with me, pretend that you caught the fish right outside my house. But your house, there is no fish there. No, I know, but just humor me, okay? Here's some money. Yeah, everybody, okay? You just come and fish outside my mansion there. And they do. Lots of fishermen with lots of fish come, and while they're dining here, old Canius and Pythius, they bring all the fish, put the fish at his feet, and Canius saying, my goodness, so why all these fish? Is that he said, oh, didn't you know? Yes, well, perhaps I forgot to tell you. This is the place where all the fish and the fishing for Syracuse actually starts. Everything, the water and everything, all starts from here. If this was going to disappear, people would have no fish. Fishermen would have nowhere to fish. This is the place. And Canius says, are you sure that you don't want to sell? No, I don't want to sell. You sure? Because, never really thought about it. Perhaps at the right price? Well, I would be willing to pay whatever for this. And well, okay, let's talk about it. And they agree on a very high price. And with all the furniture and everything. And monies are exchanged, and it is a done deal. The next day, Canius, the knight, wakes up. He doesn't see anybody fishing there. And the next day, what happened to the fishermen? So he asked the next door neighbor in the next state, is this a fisherman's holiday today? No, why? Well, there are no fishermen here. No, there are never any fishermen here. This is not the place to fish, he says. As a matter of fact, yesterday, when there were all those fishermen there, I was wondering what on earth is going on. What is this, a farce or a comedy or what? Because no one ever comes here to fish. He had been deceived, but the deal was done. Okay, so what is... what am I getting at here? Let's go back to Erdogan. Erdogan had a pact. He broke the pact. That is not necessarily to blame, because there could be reasons, this and that, but he didn't tell his partner of what he was doing. And then the actions that he took afterwards, swaying NATO and so on, meant that he obviously decided, for whatever reasons, we don't know the reasons, that he is going, at least for the time being, to be on this side of the equation and not on that side. Okay. Now, it is possible that it is within the realm of possibility that the West, or the one world governance, or the NATO, or call it whatever you will, made promises to him. It is within the realm of possibility, right? That they said, well, look, you can have this, you can have that, you can have the other thing. And he thought, this is worth my while. Okay, so could it be that Erdogan is Canius the knight here, the Roman knight, and the West is more like Pythias here? We don't know. We know the West breaks promises. We do know that, right? It might be that... Could it be? It's just a question for you to ponder. Could it be that in this particular case, Erdogan, like Canius the knight, took the bait? And if Pythias, the West, decided not to keep his promise, or promised whatever he had to promise in order to get what they wanted, what is going to happen when those promises are not kept? Because you see, I can understand self-interest, as I said, especially on a leader who has to look after the nation's interest. You'll have to dance a little bit and move around. But you keep on that lane that leads, your ultimate goal is the self-interest of your nation. What is good for your nation? So you keep your total objective is the well-being of your nation. Okay, so that is the lane. Sometimes you will have to move about, but that is your lane. But it seems to me that Erdogan, in all his dancing about, he's actually got one foot on a slippery, thin ice and the other foot on a banana peel. And he might end up, instead of keeping on the one lane, he might end up sort of going in two opposing directions here. And the end result is going to be a very painful split, if you get my meaning. Because if he took the bait put to him by the West, it doesn't mean that the West had tried a coup on him, right? They might have promised no more color revolutions in Turkey or whatever. They might have promised whatever. all this is, I'm speculating, I'm just making all this up, obviously, I don't know. What I do know is that if the West doesn't keep its promises, it would not be the first time. I think we can acknowledge that. What does he do then? Because you see, Putin, who is a very intelligent man, but not given to emotional outbursts. In other words, he's agree with him or disagree, doesn't matter. He, 1, 2, 3. And he is patient, it seems to me. I think he also has a historical perspective, and that gives him a certain amount of wisdom. I don't care if you disagree with that. I think it does. He has a historical perspective. And so, obviously, he knows what kind of man Erdogan is, sort of moving about a little bit, yes. So, in any one particular question prior to this incident, I see Putin as looking at Erdogan and asking kind of, "Et tu, Brutus? Where do you stand exactly? Not that I am going to believe what you tell me, but I just want to hear it from you." That might have been his position up to now, but now he knows that at this particular point in time, Erdogan chose the West. Okay, so what is going to happen when the West does not keep the promises, which will inevitably happen, to my mind anyway? Is he going to go to Putin? Oh, Mr. Putin, what is he going to do then? Because what has happened here, as the examples, I didn't read you all the examples, but I mean, Cicero goes into this. When you have broken your promise, what happens is obviously lack of trust, then distrust, then mistrust. How is Erdogan going to go back to Putin's good graces? The Russians, I think, can put up, of course they were upset, but I think they can endure this. They have endured much worse, greater betrayals than just 3 leaders being released. The expansion of NATO, one, for example. So he's used to it, and he will. But let's see what happens next with Erdogan and Turkey. What do you think? I have no conclusion to this. I'm just. I have no conclusion to this. So take this as a bunch of questions for all of us to consider, and keep watching what is happening. Okay, that's it for me today. Thank you so much for listening again. Please, stay. I'm going to have this. Subscribe. I want to get to the 1,000. I'm getting into it. I don't know whether it's a good thing or not, but I'm so near. I want to get there. Okay, like, subscribe, please. Bye-bye.